So you would you would walk to school in the morning, and the bands and the ships would be out playing, and the men would be doing their exercises. And I'm telling you, it was a beautiful place. It was, at that time, for us kids, it was a beautiful place. And there was a whole group of us that, well, there was the Admiral's daughter, Eleanor Bellinger, and he was in command of the island. And then there was Captain Shoemaker, and he had two boys, Tommy and Jimmy, and we played with them because they were all the same age. And we used to play over in the Admiral's quarters, where Eleanor Bellinger lived, with Eleanor. And underneath the quarters on Fort Island, there was a fortress. A fortress had been built during World War I, and it had been used in case they had cannons in them. And they had figured that if a ship was to come into Pearl Harbor and pass that point of the island, they could fire from these cannons. And we would play down, and we called it the dungeon. And we would play down in the dungeon, and there was Eleanor and Peggy and I, and there were other girls in our group, and then the boys. The boys had a different club. They did not meet in the dungeon, but they played there. And we all went to school together. And Peggy was Queen of the May. And they had a big ceremony on the 1st of May in Hawaii. And with that, they celebrated with they had maypoles and the princess and the queen. Peggy was Queen of the May. I was very jealous of her because I wore glasses and she didn't. And I thought she was much prettier than I was. And she got to be Queen of the May. And Eleanor, the Admiral's daughter, was mistress of ceremonies, So, and Peggy Mother made the dress for Peggy. My mother made this dress for Peggy. And my mother liked to do things, but she always did them late. So the day that she was supposed to be Queen of the May, I'd walk down. They were still putting the dress together. And she didn't have a slip yet. And my dad, he just took charge, and he sat down at her sewing machine and made a slip for Peggy that very day so that she could wear it down there to this May Day thing. So our lives just kind of went along. We began to have air raid drills. And when the air raid siren went off, you had to go to the Admiral's quarters, when now the dungeon has become our air raid shelter. So when the air raid siren went off, you were supposed to take off and run right to the air raid shelter down in the basement in the old fortress. They had one air raid drill at school, and at that air raid drill, they brought a bus over and took us kids down to what they called the dispensary on Fort Island, and had us in the dispensary. It was a good thing that they didn't do that on December 7th, because December 7th, the dispensary was one of the things that they dropped a bomb on, because Daddy was in the dispensary and he got cut by glass. So we kids really, Peggy and I, we girls formed a club, and when the attack came, this is true, we were going to serve, I think we were going to serve some kind of lemonade and brownies. We took our furniture over, because this is a game we were playing, to the fort and down in the basement, and our chairs and our table, and we had our pinafores there so we could serve this stuff. You see, we were getting ready for a war, but we didn't know what war was. We had no idea. So, and then one time I went over in the basement of the BOQ, and I saw a swastika. We told Daddy about that, and he told us not to go in there again. I mean, we really didn't belong down there. The time went by. Peggy kept a diary, and on one date in June, she put down that we'd gone into Honolulu, and we were coming back, and there was a blackout air raid drill, so we had to wait until the ferry could take us back to Fort Island. My mother, they took all the Marine Corps wives and they went into Honolulu and took first aid classes. So I remember she used to bandage us up and practice on us. There was something I remember, some kind of pour about don't practice your first aid on me, just let me be, like my dad was saying. So, and then it was getting December. Okay, we passed Thanksgiving, and then we passed the Army-Navy game, and Navy won. We have a picture of my mother and father in there. I call it the last dance because it was the last party that they ever went to.
Did your dad play in that game?
Oh no, he was an adult. He was no. He just, whenever you played, I mean, the Naval Academy, they'd all get together, and celebrate. It's like the Rose Bowl game. It was the Rose Bowl game for the Army Navy would play, and Navy won. And then we had a special showing down at the school. They had a special program. It was going to be on Hawaii, and we were supposed to do the legends and sing the songs and do the hula for this Hawaiian show, okay, that the kids were putting on. And we practiced the hula. I remember practicing it. And then they had a terrible rainstorm, okay, came, and there was puddles going up to the school. There was the first time that there was water on the ground. But we still had, I'm pretty sure we still had the show. And that was December 5th that we had this show. And then we all sang, the Hawaiian Aloha Hawaii, farewell to thee. We didn't realize they were never going to come back to that school. It was just, the kids, it was just innocent. And on Saturday, we went over to the area. Am I telling you too much? We went over to the play with Eleanor over there in our clubhouse in the basement, air raid shelter of the Admiral's Course. And we had a fight. The boys had a fight too. And they had dug a pit for a gun, but they never put a gun in it. So what the boys did was they covered the pit over with, I don't know, some kind of pieces of cardboard or a plywood or something. And they played in there. That was their clubhouse. Well, we got in a fight on the 6th, okay? And the club broke up. So we brought our stuff home. I remember trying to balance the chair on the handlebars of my bicycle. So, and the boys were happy because they helped us get home, So we were going to join, and then we were going to spend the night in pup tents. We wanted to, but my father said no, we couldn't do that. He had to go home, and we had to be there. The next day, on December the 7th, we were going to go into Honolulu and go to the aquarium that they had. We were going to go to church, and we were going to go to the aquarium, and we were going to have pork roast for dinner. And making the pork roast was a big deal. And also making the dressing. When you made dressing, you had to chop up the onions, and you had to chop up the celery and chop it all up and have it all ready. And then you'd make it putting water in and taste it to make sure that it tasted just the way dressing should taste. And I guess my job, I forgot what my job was. Peggy's job was to chop up the onions and the celery. And she was in the kitchen chopping that up, okay? And she was mad at me because I wasn't doing anything. I was reading a book. I know the book. I even know the book. It was Under the Lilac Trees. It was by, Little Women, Louisa May Alcott. And I was reading the book. And I was sitting on this lounge out in Mount Lanai, and I looked out the side window of the quarters. I just looked out, and there was a fire. And at that side of the quarters was down towards the airfield, so I got up and I ran in to tell my mother that I thought the water tower was on fire, that there was a fire. And she was in her bed, and she was saying, well, what are those guns doing, shooting off the West Virginia for, the Tennessee? So when she said that, I forgot about the fire, and I went out the front door to see what was happening out front. And this Japanese airplane came over my head on a bombing run, for the ship. So then I went in to tell my mother and father. I mean, it sounds, I was a pretty frisky kid, about the airplane. And they were standing in my dad's bedroom, and he had a bathroom that was off his bedroom. And I forgot, we used to call the bathroom my dad's library because he would go in there and read. But he'd come out and we're talking to my mother and father. It was like this window here. Pretend that you could look out this window and you would see the ships. And I came in, she was on one side and he was on the other side, and I could look out, and the ships are always parallel. They're side by side, always parallel. And I looked out the window, and the superstructure of the West Virginia wasn't straight anymore. It was going to the side. So I was screaming, "Daddy, look out the window!" And of course, he looked out the window. They thought it was maneuvers. They thought it was maneuvers, and he looked out the window, and I don't. God damn it! It's the chaps. Get to the shelter, because they thought at first that it was maneuvers, but then when he realized, well, all you had to do was to look at the ship, and you knew that something was terribly wrong. So he actually pulled his uniform on over his pajamas and went to the telephone to call his men, because he had to call them to tell them to take out the bullets and everything, to get everything out, to see what was happening, and that we were supposed to go to the shelter. Well, we had our bathrobes on. We put on our shoes, and we went out the back side. We bought this house because this house reminds me of Quarters T. I love Quarters T, but Quarters T had the door that went out the front door. There was one way out. It had 5 doors out, and the back way was off the dining room. And so we ran out the back room, and we passed in front of the quarters next door, and we yelled at it that it was real to get to the shelter. And then we turned and ran down the side of the officers' club. There were 2 officers' clubs out there. There was the old BOQ and the new BOQ. And the new BOQ was brand new. The old one was on its last legs. But anyway, so we ran by the old BOQ, and my mother had her arms around me because there were bullets flying. And when we turned the corner, we got by the kitchen area of the old BOQ, and they told us pulled us in to get us in out of the street because the bullets were flying. So they took us in, pulled us into the BOQ. Now the BOQ was right in front of the Arizona.